there's a trade called taco. Trump always chickens out, right? So I think that the market, after several events that are similar, right, they start to react differently. You're not going to see this go on and on and on forever.
Hey everyone, you're watching Markets Daily, a show where we unpack everything you need to know about the crypto markets. Let's get into it today. I'm Jen Sanasi, here with my co-host Andy Baer. We are joined by Nonco CEO Fernando Martinez. Hello everyone.
Hi Jen, hi Andy, thanks for having me.
Good morning.
All right, let's talk about what's going on in the markets this morning. Fernando, what are you watching? Anything that you're surprised by?
Perfect. So I'll give you guys a little bit of color. Obviously, BTC has been very strong lately. Right now, it's trading at about 107. We have seen it up until 111, right? So that was a previous all-time high. A couple of other catalysts that we are keeping an eye on, it's Hyperliquid. Hype right now, that is probably one of the coins that all of the liquid funds are either buying or keeping an eye out for. Secondary, we're going to see Avalanche. Avalanche has announced in the last 10 days two very exciting news. First, the FIFA L1 launch. That's massive. And just yesterday night, they announced a treasury deal where they're going to be putting bonds. Let me tell you exactly what it is. 1 second. Yeah, Bergen County in New Jersey is tokenizing a $240 billion property deeds. That's going to be running on Avalanche.
As someone who lives in New Jersey, I was very excited about that news.
Yeah, us too. And then the fourth one and final one is, it seems that ETH is finally waking up, right? Ever since the Petra upgrade, there has been a very positive price action. But I believe that 2 days ago, Joe Lubin announced a treasury deal, right? Where he's going to be joining, what's the name of this company? Give me a second. Yep, Sharplink Gaming, right? Which announced a $425 million private equity deal to launch Ethereum-based corporate deals, right? So that is also massive. Those are the three assets that we're keeping an eye out outside of Bitcoin: Hyperliquid, Avalanche, and Ethereum.
I want to just ask a follow-up there on the Ethereum ecosystem. I've said this on the show a bunch. There have been a bunch of guests on the show who've said, we might see Ethereum fall into the background as some of the Ethereum competitors gain steam. Of course, we saw the Petra upgrade. Ethereum, like you said, has woken up. Is it something that's sustainable? Based on your comments, it sounds like your answer is going to be yes there.
We hope yes, right? We are obviously bullish on Ethereum. It is amongst the safest chains out there. But one thing that has been repeated over and over to us by several funds, it's that it's too big of a market cap for the amount of competitors, right? So I think ultimately they still need to keep their game face on and make sure that they are competing against the other chains as appropriately as possible.
It's interesting, the rally. I mean, ETH added $1,000 to its price during the month of May. That was sudden. I think it was conveniently located next to the Petra upgrade. And of course, the news of treasury companies starting to look into ETH, which is not a surprise, is welcome news. But it seems like this kind of came out of nowhere, right? Petra was not going to be a surprise. I didn't think people felt like Petra was going to fail. And of course, Petra doesn't really truly address, I guess, ETH's more existential problem, which is how to compete when, as an execution layer, it faces such headwinds. So are there other catalysts, or did the market just kind of decide to, move into ETH's house for May?
Yeah. So to your first point, Petra increases validator wallet functionality and also performance improvement. I agree with you that it doesn't solve all of its problems, right? So that's one. Second, I think that it was a lot of the funds were actually shorting ETH and longing BTC, right? They closed the majority of those shorts, as you said, in a timely fashion, right? So we don't understand what the true catalyst is, but we are seeing a little bit more of an improvement from a price action and inflows perspective. Right. So I think that right now it's still too early to say, but we're very excited to see how that community continues to develop and fight towards their number one position.
Yeah, that's a key point actually for viewers, that a short cover kind of fits very nicely with the pattern and the velocity, I guess, of the bounce. So that makes a ton of sense. We while you guys were over in London, there was a lot of stablecoin stuff going on here in the United States between the Genius Act and this Global Dollar Network event that we were at, and with Circle's IPO and the news that banks are going to get involved in stablecoins. Not only is this great for the government, which has a new customer for treasuries, but it should be good for layer ones, right? And ETH and Solana and others should be scrambling to kind of sop up that execution activity. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, inevitable. I think the dollar stablecoins are taking a big bite at the Swift activity, right? That's happening more and more and more and more. If you're speaking specifically around the chains, I think the competition there is tougher than what people anticipate. If you actually see, it's not always about the lowest cost, right? Right now, Tron moves the majority of the volume and it doesn't have the lowest cost. It's not even the best technology, right? So I think that there it's a little bit of a balancing act between how active are the protocols within this stablecoin movement, but also the distribution that they started to put in 5 years ago right now has a lot of effects. We are still seeing the majority of the demand being in Tether, specifically in Tron, and in Circle, specifically in ERC. That makes no sense, right? For one or the other. But we haven't seen the change towards other chains that might perform better. However, the other chains right now are putting all of their efforts and resources, like Solana, like Base, like Avalanche, to make sure that they're able to capture this flow.
I want to come back to the markets of the morning just for a second and get your reaction here. You know, the macro environment, tariffs have really been driving the market narrative, obviously in crypto and beyond. We learned that a US court was nixing Trump's tariffs this morning. And I'm surprised that we're not seeing as much of a reaction right now when I look at what's going on with the major caps. What's your read there?
I agree with you. I think the first couple of months of the year, it was solely driven by the tariffs. What is Trump going to say? What's he's not going to say? Is he going to put a tariff in Canada, Mexico, Europe, whatever it is? I think the market started to kind of like anticipate that, and the volatility or the surprise effect around that, it's not taking a lot of effect right now, right? I saw yesterday that there's a trade called Taco. Trump always chickens out, right? So I think that the market, after several events that are similar, right, they start to react differently. You're not going to see this go on and on and on forever.
We have a big options expiration tomorrow morning. I feel like there's not quite as much loaded up on this one as some of the ones earlier this year. Do you think that this is going to cause some Bitcoin volatility over the next kind of 72 hours, or is this a nothing burger?
I think it's going to be a nothing burger. I would expect Bitcoin to continue trading between 107 and 110, right? If you actually think about it and see the chart, the majority of the activity has been around Asia, right? Even for Ethereum and BTC, it seems that there's a little bit more upside there, whereas in the US sessions, we have seen some muted activity, right? So my take, it's a nothing burger.
Interesting. Of course, if we look to break out above that kind of 111, 112, you'd expect upside volatility buying and new, I guess, range seeking, right? But all year, or even towards the end of last year, we've observed these very, very tight ranges for a long time, which is interesting. It's an interesting kind of newer characteristic for Bitcoin.
Correct. I couldn't agree more. I think obviously we are betting that it's going to break out, right? But the last leg up was 2 weeks ago or a week ago, right? So I think that we also need to be a little bit more conservative towards our expectations and also what the market catalysts are. I don't think tomorrow is going to be that answer.
Fernando, I want to talk maybe a little bit about local community now. You and I were recently in London at the Avalanche Summit. I attended the Avalanche Summit last year, which was in Buenos Aires. You are based in Mexico. We spend so much time on this show talking about what's going on in North America and the markets in North America and how global events impact them. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on in Mexico as it pertains to crypto development and what you're watching there.
Absolutely. So I think we need to separate crypto into two, right? From a market and investment perspective, it will always be driven by North America, sometimes Asia. It's never going to be the south of the hemisphere, right? South of the hemisphere will always be more driven towards the real use cases or the benefits that crypto can bring. And that's going to be stablecoins, right? So in Mexico, in Argentina, in Colombia, even in Brazil, right, it will be driven by how you can move money around faster, better, cheaper. And that is specifically around stablecoins. With regards to Mexico, I think it's a vibrant economy right now. Like the community is very, very much active and looking towards how to improve our daily usage of money. Right now, we have about 8% of the Mexico to US remittance being driven with stablecoins. And with regards to trade finance, which is like 10 times bigger, we're seeing also that uptick. And that actually started about 18 months ago with all of the Chinese companies that started setting shop here, right? So it wasn't that the Mexican community or the Mexican guys started to demand more stable coins. It was actually driven by the nearshoring activity that we're seeing here. And if you think about it and you actually start to look into these local markets, it's always that, right? In Brazil, 30% of the imports from China happen on stable coins, right? Obviously, Argentina, that's a different use case, but Colombia, we see that as well, right? So the Southern Hemisphere will always be a little bit more inclined towards how to move money around, a little bit more efficient, and how do they have access to the dollar side, given the volatility and the inflation around their currencies.
It's funny, every time we talk, Fernando, you run a trading business, and trading businesses like to make money from trading, right? But we end up talking about stable coins and supporting other currencies and settlements and different chain settlements and moving money faster and operational efficiencies. Is this just your favorite part of the business, or do you think that this is what gives Nonco sort of an edge?
I think that's exactly what gives us an edge, right? It's not necessarily the settlement, but it's being a little bit more pragmatic as to what gives you the best return for your money, right? We do about 40% month-on-month margins, right? So that's super healthy. If you compare that to against any other trading firm, it is an outlier. And the reason that we are able to perform like that is because we're solely focused on the trends and the counterparty needs. If you think and you position yourself as a service-oriented company, how can you service your counterparts and the industry better? Then it will result in scalability. You cannot scale without technology. It doesn't matter if it's markets or it's stables. It's about how do I make sure that our operation can do more, faster, and better, and more consistent. Human elements, it's never going to be the answer, right? You do need, of course, the complementary of a human to manage risk, to make discretionary decisions, right? But ultimately, if you want to do something 1,000 times in a day, you got to scale it. Okay, so that is what gets me most excited about. How can we grow as fast as possible with the least humans available, right? And leverage our technology.
I love hearing this, and many of the viewers are fanatically interested in the development of payment technology, but a lot of folks just want to know outside of Bitcoin. Of course, we love the idea that people would just buy indices to allocate to the rest of crypto and not time the markets and not, try to select individual tokens, but get growth. But if we wanted to go more active and say, like, if payments and stable coins and user experience and ease and things like that are going to really proliferate and enjoy U.S. regulation and just start to really take more shape, what should people think about, or what kind of names should people look at? Is it the layer ones? Is it other infrastructure names to see the uptake, to see signs of momentum there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I agree with you. So let's say on crypto as an asset class, I think it's going to be Bitcoin and an index, right? CD20 is a clear leader. When you start to take a look at stable coins, it's not like you can invest. Well, probably you're going to be able to invest in Circle, right? But outside of that, how do you get an upside? I don't think that it's going to be necessarily by investing in the L1s, because the L1s have a lot of focuses. Sure, stablecoin is one of them, but it's not going to be everything, right? So if I were to invest in stablecoin, I would take a look at the picks and shovel companies that are out there. Right now, the majority of the deals are being on a private level, right? But the VCs are definitely focused on it, and they have specific funds allocated for that. We just saw Felix Pago, I think it raised $75 million on a Series A. We just saw Conduit raise $36 million on a Series A. 5 months ago was the Bridge acquisition, right? So my gut feel would be you gotta invest on the picks and shovels, because that's what's gonna be replacing the traditional money movement system. Now, right now, it seems that everybody is playing the spray and pray game, as they understand that this is definitely something that will revolutionize and will continue growing. But who's going to do it? How many are out there? That's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? If you invest in deal ones, I don't know if it's going to be a direct correlation towards the usage of stablecoins.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess a parallel conversation I've had with several VCs over the past few weeks is similar. You know, they're looking at equities that are best positioned to benefit from the stablecoin boom that is inevitably coming. So that is
If you have the CEO of a public token trading platform telling you to look at privates, you know he's not talking his book. So it's a credible statement. It's a credible statement.
All right, maybe we leave it on that note. Andy, Fernando, thank you very much for joining Markets Daily today. As always, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Andy. Ciao.